Hi, I'm Keith Dowen. This is the Burgonet of Charles V, and this is Up in Arms. At first sight, this helmet might not appear that impressive, but first impressions can be deceiving. This helmet was made for the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, the most powerful man in the world at the time. Indeed, he had an armour made for him, which is now in Paris, decorated with the initials KD, standing for Carolus Divus, the Divine Charles. This helmet originally belonged to an armour known as the palm leaf or palm branch armour, which was made by the Mantuan court armourer Caromolo Mondrone, and is illustrated in Charles's inventory of his arms and armour, known as the Inventario Illuminado. Mondrone was born in Milan in 1489. Now, Milan had established itself over the previous few hundred years as a really important centre of the armourer's craft. We know that by 1521, Mondrone had moved into Mantua and was working as Federico Gonzaga's court armourer. In addition to making armours for Federico himself, we know from the extensive archival documents that he was also involved in making armour for Gonzaga's friends, family, and political allies. However, there was no more famous client than the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Charles V, like his father, the Emperor Maximilian I, was one of the greatest patrons of arms and armour of the period. For the Renaissance prince, armour was part of the currency of power. It was vital in crafting his identity on the international stage. Now, armour made in the all'antica or classical style, that's using pieces of sculpture, surviving artworks from the ancient world as inspiration, are now enabled Renaissance princes to refashion their identities as some of the heroes of the past. This is particularly the case for this helmet, which was made in 1536 by Mondrone for Charles V, following his successful North African campaign of 1536. So Charles V is sometimes known as the Last Crusader, and in 1535 he was determined to take the port city of Tunis in North Africa from Kaya ad-Din, the Ottoman naval commander in the Mediterranean, who has gone down in history as Barbarossa. In 1536, Charles assembled a huge armada of 400 ships and possibly as many as 50,000 men to cross the Mediterranean and take this vital city. They landed at the site of ancient Carthage, which famously was one of Rome's greatest enemies and certainly would have been a propaganda coup for Charles V. His army then moved on to the fortress of La Goletta, and after a siege, it fell. At the same time, around 20,000 Christian slaves in the city of Tunis also rose up against their masters, and the city was taken. Unsurprisingly, for a period which was so concerned with reviving the history of ancient Greece and Rome, it wasn't long before Charles V was seen as the new Scipio Africanus, the famous Roman general who had defeated Hannibal. The allusion to Charles V as a victorious Roman commander is certainly evident in this helmet. It's been decorated with palm fronds, the ancient symbol of victory, and although not present on this helmet, other elements of the armour have been decorated with pseudo-Islamic script representing Charles's victory over the Ottomans in North Africa. The skill with which this helmet was made is really striking. It is a tour de force of the armourer's art. You can see how the skull of the helmet has been drawn back elegantly over the nape of the neck. You have a high comb, which is alluding to the feathered crests on ancient helmets. Originally, although the surface is now bright, it would have been a dark blue, which was achieved through heat treatment. And as I mentioned earlier, you have palm fronds embossed along the top of the skull. The embossing was achieved by laying the helmet onto a bed of pitch, and then using various tools, the design was hammered down into the pitch itself being flexible. To get the fine lines of the decoration, this was then turned around, and a chisel was used to sharpen the design itself. Originally, the palm fronds would have been gilt using a process known as mercury gilding. That's when a layer of copper is applied to the steel, an amalgam or a mixture of gold and mercury is painted on. It's heated, the mercury fumes are driven off, and the gold remains adhering to the to the surface. Unfortunately, most of that gold has now been scrubbed away, but if you look very carefully in certain areas, you can still see traces of gilding. The helmet would originally have been lined and provided with a pair of cheek pieces, although unfortunately these are now missing. Now, taking into consideration the overall size of the helmet and with the padding as well, it's actually pretty small. And that's one of the interesting things about armour, is it can often give us insights into the build of the people who actually wore the pieces. There's absolutely no doubt that Mondrone was a skilled armourer. We know from the correspondence of the Mantuan ambassador to Charles V that in 1525 he was presented with an armour that Charles remarked was more valuable to him than a city, and even if he had been measured 1,000 times for it, there's no way it would have fitted any better. So this helmet belongs to an armour known as the palm leaf armour or palm branch armour, and it's illustrated in the inventory of Charles V's arms and armour, known as the Inventario Illuminado, and the Royal Armouries has an early 20th century copy of it here. You can see the helmet in the top corner. Originally, it was provided with a pair of cheek pieces, which are now sadly missing. We don't know why the blued areas appear as red in the manuscript. That's a bit of a mystery, because on other leaves in the manuscript, the armour is coloured either blue or black, as we would expect. Parts of this armour are spread out all across the world. The arms, for example, are in the Royal Armoury in Madrid. This helmet doesn't quite fit. It's not actually part of the armour, but it's also found in Madrid. So there are a few mysteries to this helmet. For example, around the bottom edge, we have a row of lining rivets that would have secured a textile lining to the inner part of the bowl, obviously to make it more comfortable to wear. However, there are lots of other rivet holes, and we don't quite know what their function was. So these rivet holes here were undoubtedly used to suspend the cheek pieces, but there are two holes at the back here, a hole in the middle, two holes at the front. But those holes aren't matched on the other side. Instead, you've just got two in the centre. Now, there's nothing in the illustration in the Inventario Illuminado that actually gives us a clue as to what those holes were. So they might have appeared long after Charles's death, before we purchased this helmet in 1842. If you know the answer, or you think you might know the answer, please do suggest in the comments. So although this helmet is designed to emulate helmets from Greek, Roman and Macedonian history, it is actually a functional battlefield piece. Now, armour could be made for the parade, and indeed the Royal Armouries and numerous other collections have very good examples of parade armour that feature heavily embossed designs. But the embossing on this is quite restrained, and the helmet itself is really a functional battlefield helmet. We know that Charles V fought in the trenches around the siege of La Goleta in 1536, and he risked his life in numerous other engagements. Armour was therefore more than just a symbol to him, it was a guarantee to protect his life. So when Charles V eventually retired in 1555 to the monastery of Yuste and handed over the reins of power to his son Philip II, who is famous for sending the Armada in 1588 to England, he took a number of things with him. And we know that he took armour with him. So clearly, in his last days, he wanted to be reminded of some of the glories of his past. Thank you very much for watching. The Royal Armouries is a charity, so you can support us by donating, and there'll be a link in the description. Please do come and visit our 3 sites, Fort Nelson down in Portsmouth, the Tower of London, and here in Leeds, where you can see further amazing armours like this helmet. The most important thing, though, is for you to like and subscribe this video, and please keep an eye out for further content.